Hey, everybody, welcome to Navel Gazing, the Valley Indie Podcast. The podcast is a vlogcast this week because I'm doing it on Zoom. First things first, the guest this week, I'm very excited to have this conversation, is the Ansonia Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Joseph DiBacco. Welcome to the broadcast, Mr. DiBacco.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
And I'll apologize in advance. You're going to hear a lot of banging and screaming from upstairs. We're recording this 3 p.m. on Tuesday, a few days before Thanksgiving. My kids are remote learning, and this is the time of day where they just start rebelling and they're getting sick of their work, and so they're carrying on. But I guess everybody in the Valley just about is going through the same thing this week if you have kids in school. And my kids are second grade and fifth grade. But before we begin, I just want to read a quick note from the sponsor, valleygivesback.org. While giving back is always in season, now is a great time to plan your gift. Name a Valley nonprofit in your estate plan and create a legacy that tells future generations what mattered to you. With a planned gift, you have the power to impact the Valley forever without affecting your current lifestyle. Your action will inspire others to make a difference in their own way. Remember the Valley. Ask your accountant, financial planner, or attorney about planned giving options. Plan now, give later, impact tomorrow. Learn more at valleygivesback.org. So, and the other thing I wanted to mention very briefly, Team Inc.'s Toys for Kids, the annual toy drive that happens every year, is happening. If you want to apply, and I've seen this on social media a lot. I did a podcast a week ago, but not everybody listens to podcasts or watches these. But if you go to teaminc.org, you can sign up if you qualify to be a recipient of this year's annual Toys for Kids drive. Or if you want to donate, they make it very easy to donate, and you just have to go to teaminc.org. Also, people have been asking about food donations. I know Thanksgiving's right here. I posted about 5 last week. Not everybody saw them, but I got one today. Derby Centennial Lions Club food drive is coming up Saturday, December 5th. That's going to be in front of 69 Elizabeth Street in Derby, and that benefits the Spooner House over in Shelton. So I know a lot of people are feeling a certain way. You know, the holidays are here, but it doesn't kind of feel like Thanksgiving, and there's so much going on. We've been through so much since March, but there are ways you can take action. You know, there's that old saying, change a thought by taking action or something. I just butchered that. But anyway, enough of that. I thought we would talk, Dr. DiBacco, about the decision in Ansonia to go to remote learning. You and I had a phone conversation about a month ago, and it was the first time it sort of laid bare to me how much time superintendents, administrators in the school districts, and teachers, everybody collectively, is spending so much time on COVID. So what was the final straw that caused you to switch to remote learning? And I'll learn to speak by the end of this broadcast. Don't you worry.
So will I. What the more of the impetus and what was occurring were conversations that we were having with our district medical advisor, and what really brought everything up to the forefront was looking at our community spread and really looking at what the numbers said. And Department of Public Health, DPH, they put out a guide for schools. It said, once you hit a threshold of 25 per 100,000, you should really, that's when you should be going to remote learning. And typical Ansonia fashion, we're overachievers. Excuse me. We went from.
That's okay. This will start making noise in a second too. I'll be getting text messages. You guys had exceeded that quite quickly.
Yeah, we went from the yellow. We forgot the orange. That overachievers. We went right to the red, and we were over 25, and I really worked with our district medical advisor and say, listen. And at first we were wanting to see if it would be sustained at 25 or if we would drop back down or if it was going to increase. And that at that point, we were in school for about a week. And I said, you know what? I want my board and the public to hear from what I'm hearing from my medical advisor to understand the decisions that I'm going to have to make moving forward. And on November 11th, at our board meeting, Dr. Casablanca came and our board members asked questions. He was pretty frank and pretty honest with what he was seeing in the community and what was going on in hospitals and who was being hospitalized and who was being impacted by COVID. And the other thing that I think people also forget is, COVID is indiscriminate, but it does disproportionately impact, Black and brown populations. And we look at our school population, and I look at the population of Ansonia. Our school population is about 70%. It's a minority majority population. I also have to look at the housing that we have in Ansonia. When you look at, I think it's 49 or 50% of our housing is multifamily. And we're looking at a lot of our students and families in general that are living multi-generational in multifamily housing in the 10th most densely populated city in the state of Connecticut and 6.2 square miles. So when you look at that, and also understanding the fact that it's something that I bring up oftentimes, our schools, the mitigation, the things that they're making us do in schools is unbelievable. I mean, I don't want to put a store or anything out there, but they are safer than going to the gym or any place else because we have extra hands on deck, sanitize. It's just things that we have to do in schools, but they're only with me for 6 hours. 18 hours they're in the community. And what he also brought up, Dr. Casablanca said, we were very fortunate that we had warm weather all the way up until about that Wednesday of that week. And then it got cold pretty quick. And then he said, there's going to be something called the COVID fatigue, where people are just done with quarantining, but also the weather being colder, people are going to be inside. And if they're going to be inside, he said, Joe, are they going to be in tight quarters? Are they going to be, fraternized? Are they going to be on top of each other? And the answer is, in Ansonia, the answer is yes. I mean, it's yes. I mean, we have the multi-families, we have people living multi-generationally. And when you looked at that, our numbers even spiked even higher. And his input, even though as difficult as it could be, because I know students need to be in school. I get it. As a father I have a kindergartner and a second grader. And I have a 19-month-old, and I know my wife, there's days that it's very, very tough. And I get it. But at the same time, I look at my teachers, I look at my students, I look at my families. I would not want anything to ever happen to granny, auntie, or someone else, or my staff members, my paras, my secretary. I just can't. And so the answer for us at this juncture was to go remote. And the reason why it was remote was staffing was becoming unbelievably difficult. And I don't understand how other districts aren't at the same level. So another thing that we had to do is my assistant superintendent, myself, we did a complete analysis on our staffing and where people lived and if they had school-age children by looking at where our staff, what districts would impact us the most. We had a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary tier of communities that could impact us. I'll give you an example. If Milford, Hamden, and Wallingford are out, that's our primary. Those 3 districts could really jam us up. And I noticed they were going to go out long-term. And then we had secondary districts like the Sheltons, the Seymours, the Oxfords, Region 16, and Monroe was like our second. And then we had a tertiary list as well. But when we looked at doing the analysis of school-age children, we're looking because right now, at least before, Eugene, just so you know, you used to be able to test out of quarantine. By test out of quarantine, if I was positive and I was near you, they would say, Eugene, go get tested tomorrow. And I would cover you for maybe 2 or 3 days because the test results would come back. Now they're saying you're going to have to wait 4 to 7 days before you have enough viral load before you would even, your test to be accurate. So now you're waiting, say 6 days plus another 3 days. Now you're 9 days out. You're staying out for the whole 14 days. Now, if you're a parent, if your spouse, if your child has to stay in, guess what? My staff they have families. So what happens is I lose And I think I gave you the, for instance, it was a Friday. I had 3 staff members out. That Monday, Seymour went out and Assumption was out. I had 12 staff members out of my 30 some odd at Ansonia Middle School. I had a third of my staff. I mean, with tape and glue, I was able to muscle through a Monday, but after that, I had to shut it down because I didn't have staffing. I mean, I could put anyone in front of a class, but I want a certified person in a room that, my students can learn from. So it got to the point, and that was the threshold. It was, COVID is one thing, and I know our buildings are safe, but to safely staff our buildings, I mean, I had a kindergarten group or a group at one of our elementary schools, and I think in 35 days, they came into live instruction 4 days. And I just don't know. It was so fragmented. I mean, I even had parents say, just tell me one way or the other. We know it's happening. We know it's going to happen. Either just shut it down so at least I could plan for my job. Neither way is pleasant. There's no right answers right now. There's no best answers. But I could tell you when I did shut down, I don't know where my phone number or my cell phone number is listed, but I had superintendents sending me text messages. Oh, I'm so happy that you did it. And I'm glad now they felt like a kindred spirit. But the thing is, you waited for me to do it.
Well, yeah, there is that thing that happens that I've seen online. I just learned today, Comcast is going to be, if you go over a certain data limit every month, you're going to be hit with charges coming next year. And I exceed that by 1,000,000,000% just by the nature of the job. But so I was watching online. There was an attitude developing in the public to some extent. This is a small point because I'm not trying to be negative, but there was a small point, a belief out there that, well, my school is staying in person and therefore we're doing the right thing, as if that just didn't make sense. If you have to switch to remote learning, it's not a failure of the school district or the people in a community. This is a pandemic that's going on. But you just brought up a million good points that I don't think people were realizing over the last month or so, especially in terms of going from testing out of quarantine to staying in. Because so many, the science on this and everything changes every day with this pandemic because it's brand new to us. But one thing I wanted to ask you, and I had a hard time sort of following it and explaining it to readers, and then in social media trying to sort of have back and forth with people, because there was this idea that from the federal government and then to state government to some extent, where they were saying, well, stay in school as long as you can, stay in school as long as you can. And yet there was the guidance from the state that came out the first time we were all out back in March and April, where it said if you hit a certain threshold, if you had community spread at a certain threshold set by the doctors and the scientists, you had to go remote, or you at least had to take a hard look at it. I noticed the state verbiage was a little vague, which is probably on purpose because that's what bureaucrats do. But did you have some of that same misgivings there? I guess your point is, to summarize, is that it really depends on the local situation. And that's why the local control is so important here, which I think the governor Lamont has sort of come around to that. But did you feel guilty at all for having to go remotely?
I did feel, just because from a parent standpoint, to be honest, I know, and maybe from the educator, the best place for kids is in our buildings. But I also knew from like a Papa Bear standpoint, if I can't keep the kids safe and I can't keep them, adequately staffed with the right people, I'm not going to open up and do it. I don't want to say, I'm going to do it all in. I'm going to do it the Ansonia way. I'm not going to do it kind of a mishmash, and that's kind of what it looked like it was turning into. And I'm like, this is not our best foot forward. And I also felt that listening to the doctors, but the level of guilt, I got to tell you, there was a level of that. But the other part was I got a call on my cell phone from the Commissioner of Education. So he's from Meriden. I'm from Meriden. Goes to my church. I know him quite well. So I'm like, oh man, I go, talking about guilt. I'm like, I'm going to get him. I'm going to get it right now. I felt like, but he actually just called up just to check in to see how I was doing. He understood where I was coming from, and he was like, listen, he goes, you've always put kids in the front. He goes, I've been here twice. He came to Ansonia twice already this past year, and spoke to kids. And he goes, I know this was a tough decision for you. I'm like, Miguel, you don't. So yes, the level of guilt was there, and especially when the commissioner calls up. And the only thing that I thought was pretty cool, that it was just really to check in on me and check in on Ansonia. But you're right. There was a more of an obligation. Schools should be open, and you keep hearing, in the first time schools have ever been closed. They never closed when we had the flu, Spanish flu. They never closed. I just think things were different in March, but I think things are different now as well. When I see just from November 20th to November 23rd in the Valley, 208 cases. I mean, it's so hard, to say, let's stay open, because I don't know what the right answer is, but I could tell you, for me to err on the side of, being ultra, conservative on this one, and on the side of caution, I don't mind it. But there's a lot of evidence, and when your district medical advisor is pretty much saying, you know what, this is probably what you need to do. I mean, you were on that same, meeting. I mean, if you didn't get that same impression from Dr. Casablanca, I mean, he was pretty direct after he spoke to me. He goes, if I was the superintendent, he goes, I don't know if I would stay open much longer if I were you.
Yeah, I remember that was very clear. And I've had a hard time just as a reporter, one person, trying to sort of wield all the COVID information since March. And one thing I think, that if we ever have another pandemic, and I hope to God we do not, but it would help in the Valley to have sort of one public information officer, one person who could explain, and this is probably impossible, who could explain, here's what's going on in the school districts, here's what's going on in our business community, because all the information is sort of all over the place. If you look to New Haven, they sort of have that, but we're several different towns. I don't know where I was going with that. But yeah, one thing I wanted to point out is, you can't deny the fact that we're in a second wave here. And the way people react to that is very interesting. When I don't think you're trying to spread fear. When I reported on Ansonia, debating whether to go remote, and then finally making the decision, not finally, but actually rather quickly making the decision to do so, the goal isn't to scare people. I mean, someone pointed out to me last week that, okay, yes, testing is way up in the Valley. The amounts of people testing positive in the last 30 days is way up. We've had now, I think, 7 deaths in the last month that have been COVID associated or COVID probable. Yes, if you compare it to April, where we had 6 people dying a day in nursing homes, it's not the same. But, of course, it's not the same as it was when it was first introduced to our world, and we had no way to deal with it, and we were just sort of trying to put out fires everywhere. But what's happening is happening. If I wanted to scare people, I would say there's been a 600% increase in deaths the last 30 days, but that's just not the goal. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. And you do bring up, I guess if we look at it one way, there's been 255 deaths, COVID associated or COVID probable in the Valley since March, 217 COVID-19 associated deaths, laboratory confirmed, 38 probable, and 2.75 of that came in the last 30 days. So I did, and the other thing I want to point out, I've had the Griffin Hospital top doc on, infectious disease guy, talking about how the hospital's doing okay. They're not seeing people dying left and right like they were in April, which is all positive news. But it's definitely still here. But the light's at the end of the tunnel. Do you get that impression, Doc, that if we can just get through this, we got to homeschool our kids for a couple of months through the new year. No one likes that. But the light's at the end of the tunnel. Are you hearing that in education circles as well?
And that's what I'm really, really hoping. That's kind of like where, my heart is, and my promise, my hope is that, we're going to have to stomach this, muscle through this, and that there is hope. I mean, every time, I don't try to, I hate to say it, I don't know what to believe anymore much now, news or on what I'm reading, or the most I've ever read on something, and still I could get a counterclaim on everything. But I do feel more confident now than I did in March that this was going to not end, but, we'll be able to mitigate it and slow it down. But I'd like to think that we're going to be returned to school, whatever measures we have to put in place. But I mean, there is promise. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. That's what I would like people to think and think and see. I'm not here to spread doom and gloom. I just want to be, precautionary and have that pretty much that cautionary tale that I think we could do this correctly and do this well, keep people as safe as we can. And it's probably not perfect, but yeah, we might have to homeschool our kids a little bit and move through it. And I also know some families, I have a, my kids are younger, K-2. The only thing I could tell you, it's tough. What the state wants us for hours, they want at least half of the day to be synchronous, asynchronous instruction. And I have people like, hey, listen, it's too much time in front of the screen. I agree. I'll be the first one to tell you. You know what? I don't want a kid sitting in front of the screen that long. We just have to find a delicate balance that also fulfills what the state is looking at us in their addendum 4. It says, hey, this is what we would like to see when it comes to what a school day should look like if it's going to count for a remote learning day. Well, I think they should probably have some things that take into account kindergartners, first. I mean, even for us in Ansonia, for example, I have them using tablets instead of the Chromebooks just because, I'm trying to watch my own daughter manipulate a laptop, the mouse, the touchpad. I mean, it's
tough.
It's tough to watch. And so, at least with a tablet. But the thing is, I know what the state was trying to do is give us that guidance and say, this is the number of hours, or this is what a day needs to consist of. If you're not engaged over half the day doesn't count. And so you're right. It goes into, I don't want to see kids in front of the screen. I don't think this is going to be forever. And nothing is close to being perfect at this juncture. And anyone who tells you that, any superintendent is like, oh yeah, we have it all figured out, flip the channel, because no one has it all figured out.
And let me ask you, Doc, if I'm a parent in Ansonia, I'm sorry to interrupt, but if I'm a parent in Ansonia who's struggling, maybe either my child isn't taking to online learning, maybe the session's dropping out, because we all have to have a perfect internet connection now. As I realize I'm using my Wi-Fi instead of, I should have wired my computer. But what's your advice? What steps can a parent take who might be frustrated? I mean, I was just yelling at my son. Literally yelling at him to try to get his work done, because that last hour of the day is always a push. What can they do? How can they cope? Who can they turn to for help?
Well, it's funny. We were just talking. I had the same conversation with my daughter. I'm like, listen, you have to read or go on the reading program. I think we use Lexia. You got to go on for at least a half hour, and it's like it's difficult for everyone. So who can you reach out to? First, if your child's in a remote class, your child's teacher, number one, to see what they can get for help or assistance. And if it's even bigger than that, it's the administrator. But if you need someone for them we still have our social workers that are on. We still have our our school psychologists. We have our school climate people, even just someone for the kids to talk to. What I found, and this is even funnier, that sometimes the parents just needed someone else to talk to before they didn't even put the kid on the line yet. It was more, and we do have a relationship with PCRC. So if there are, I've read some articles about if, just because of lack of social interaction, some kids that are beyond a funk. I don't like using the word depression, throw it out, but they want to see people. Just this morning, my daughter's like, can we just talk to anybody that FaceTime? And I get it. So we have those community connections between BHK or PCRC, but we have our own staff that's available. And when it comes to internet, we have 400 Comcast vouchers. So for families that do not have internet, and even if they did have a bill or a balance, we give them a voucher with it has like a password, and they can get in for those in some areas that either the vouchers and or the Wi-Fi Comcast doesn't work as well. I have Khajiit hotspots. I gave about 50 of them away. I probably have about 100 more.
Okay.
I got it from the State Department of Education. They provided some laptops and connectivity. So when it comes to connectivity, we're here to help. I would tell you, before you reach out into Facebook, which is the ether, that's not, and what I found is some parents, maybe they feel better by saying something out there, but the real way is asking either the child's teacher or the administrator, and because there's help out there. And I don't want to sound cliche, oh, we're in this together, but listen, one thing about this time is giving all of us time to reflect, time to think about what's really important and what matters most. And what I found is Ansonia is one of the toughest and strongest communities when we work together. And you know what? You can either go on Facebook and say whatever you have to say, or direct that question or that issue towards someone who could really help you out, because Facebook doesn't always it's not always there to help you, but we have tech staff, we have support staff. So I would tell people, listen, reach out. And if we can help, we will. And if we can't, we'll direct you to where you can get more help. But it's not easy. And I know some struggles are much greater than others. But,
yeah. And one thing, like, I don't think it is a cliche. I think it's important. I mean, I need to hear that we're in this together, as one parent over in Derby. We are all in this together, and I just can't wait for Thanksgiving this year. I mean, it's just going to be me, my wife, and my 2 kids, but I don't know if you feel that way as well. I just can't wait to have some downtime. I haven't seen my mother over in New York. She's 83. I haven't seen her since February. But what are your feelings on Thanksgiving? Because in some ways it makes it more special, given everything we're going through.
It does. It gives you pause. It gives you reason to pause in what you are thankful for. And by coming together, I can only tell you, like, for example, superintendents, oftentimes they hold their cards pretty close. Oh, we're doing this. And they don't want to tell you the magical things that they're doing. I've seen superintendents more forthcoming, more helpful. I mean, I talk to Doc Conway all the time. I love giving him a hard time. So, like, for example, in the Valley, we talk to each other very, very often. And it's something that I actually hope it continues after COVID. I hope that level of camaraderie continues, because it's oftentimes it's not really seen that way. But I did hear a great idea from the media specialist at our high school. And I think it's funny because Ansonia, to not talk about Ansonia football during Thanksgiving is just something that it's hard not to associate one without the other. Mm-hmm. And it's, she's like, her name is Pam. She's like, she was Googling, like, games of the past. And I actually think I'm going to watch if I could find on YouTube an old Ansonia Thanksgiving football game. And so I can still feel like I'm having a traditional Thanksgiving, more intimate with just not my extended family, even though it sounds horrible. But, there's nothing better than waking up early in the morning. Sometimes people go to their different social places and gather and then go to the game. This would have been a home game for us. I would have loved to been, superintendent walking on the Nolan field. But I think I'm going to have to do it virtually this year and maybe watch an old game. I think I'm going to try to either 94 or 95 is one of the games I'm trying to find.
And you could absolutely do that. I know it was Sean Morse, this guy, and Mike Kenichi of Derby, who were running the, I believe it was Derby Ansonia Classic Football on YouTube. They were taking a lot of the Comcast originals, or then I guess it was under another name whose name escapes me, but they were digitizing. So those are definitely on YouTube. That's a great idea. And the other thing, before I let you go, and thank you so much for coming on, you've only been Ansonia superintendent for a year, which is that just blows my mind, because it feels like 12.
Yeah, it's dog years now. It's dog years, definitely. It was a great honor, number one, coming here as the assistant super. And I never would have thought in my first year, we were firing on all cylinders. We were ready to go. I was probably the only superintendent who wanted testing to happen come at last March before we shut down. I'm like, listen, our scores, the way our students were working, our families, our teachers. I mean, I give credit from everyone, from our secretaries to our custodial to our food service. Everything was just firing. I was like, this is I want to test because I want to show the community how much growth has happened in a year. And then COVID hits. So I'm like, man, first year as superintendent to have a shutdown, and then for them to say, oh, get packets together. By the grace of God, I asked our teachers, I said, all right, listen, we'll get packets together. And then 2 days later, we handed out 1,800 laptops, and we became a one-to-one district. And my staff and my administrators, in the community, they willed it to happen. Most districts roll out one-to-one probably in about 3 years, and we did it in 3 days. So in year one, to roll out a one-to-one program, which is not perfect, there's usually a lot more training for families and parents to help them with the technology and assure that they have technology. But to do that in year one, and then year two, to open up in hybrid, which, listen, no one has ever opened up in a hybrid. People, hey, what does it look like? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I have an idea what it should look like, but how about you just go 1 week on, 1 week off, or this? Listen, yes. So for year one and year two, I'm going to say, if it's dog years, I'm probably about 12 and a half years in, if we're going to use dog years right now.
Yeah, it's incredible. And, one last thing, I want to thank you for being open, because every letter you've sent out, traditionally schools, I mean, I've been a reporter now for, I think, I don't know, since 1998. I don't know how to add. And that's not counting college, high school. But schools can be institutions. They're open with certain things and very prickly about others. But you have been sending out letters and sharing them, not just with the school community, but to Mike Mako at the Post and myself. So the greater community is informed about, and I'm just talking specifically COVID, but I do really appreciate that, because it helps. And then, I made a mistake. I took something off Facebook, thinking like, well, Superintendent Ansonia is never going to get back to me. And you were right away. You were like, hey, that's wrong. And I corrected it. And I apologize for that, but you've been great to work with. And I very much appreciate that.
Well, listen, I appreciate you, because, I told you, you have my cell phone number, and I want the public to also know that it should be an open process. You should know what's going on if you have questions, but if I don't help with the narrative, no one's going to understand it. If there's a void or a vacuum, people fill in the narrative for what they think or what they want. There's just a lot of innuendo and conjecture. And this is not the time for innuendo or conjecture. We need facts, and people need the information. I look at this. I have people's children in my building. Guess what? You want to know what's going on, and you should know. So that's why I told you, anytime you need something, give me a call. I said you, and I said the same thing to Mike. So you know what? Hopefully we could do more of these and have these honest conversations, so the public knows, where we are and what's going on.
All right, sir. Well, happy Thanksgiving.
And
thanks again. Good luck with everything. I appreciate it.
Much appreciated. Take care.
All right. Take care.